For those who don't know, everyone who works at Transport Evolved drives a plug-in vehicle. And for many of us, that also extends to our partners. This, for those of you who don't know, is my wife's Kia Soul EV. It's a 2015 model, just 1 year after it was introduced in the US, and we bought it with a lot of miles on the clock. You can find out more about that up here. But how is it faring now, 2 years later, and as we cross the 90,000 mile mark? We wanted to check in because we're getting near the end of that battery warranty, and is it doing okay? So let's find out what's been good, what's been bad, and how is that battery pack doing? Now, as someone who owned a Morris Minor, I am no stranger to doing preventative maintenance. The Minor, if you don't keep up with it, it all just adds up, and suddenly you find yourself with an enormous pile of work. You go from, oh, I didn't bother to do this one job 3 weeks ago, to now I'm not moving at the side of the road. The Soul is the very antithesis of that for us. I would love to tell you about all the jobs that I have done, and I can. There, we've finished. Those are the jobs that I've done. I've topped up the screen wash. When we bought her, I changed the windscreen wipers for new ones because this was the cheapest Soul EV that we could find. It was the cheapest Soul EV for sale in the US. It had actually arrived in the dealer's inventory, and we went to see it before it was ready to go out on the lot. In fact, we bought it before it was ready to go out on the lot. As he said, we'll tack on a couple of thousand once we've cleaned up these problems. And we said, you know what, don't bother cleaning up those problems, we'll take it. They were absolutely determined to steam clean the car. When we got it, it really didn't look like it had been cleaned at all. And actually, the first thing that I did was spend most of a day cleaning the interior, cleaning the upholstery, and getting the car into a condition where, if not beautiful, we could use it. We then thought about fixing the hole in the front bumper. I mean, it's not a big problem, it doesn't affect our safety, but it's certainly not pretty. We also talked about the fact that there are scrapes and dents on one side, and maybe we should get those fixed. Have I done it? No. Haven't touched it. I mean, sure, it would be nice. There are some scabs on the bonnet here, and I do have some touch-up paint, which I'm intending to use. Now it's sunny and dry. When I got the paint, it pretty much instantly started raining, and then has rained persistently ever since, it being winter in the Pacific Northwest. Now it's spring and the sun's out, and I look at these scabs and I think, probably should fix them. They are starting to go a bit rusty. So that is on my list of jobs to do. That front bumper, also kind of on my list, kind of not. Sort of tempted to ignore it, to be honest. But in discussion with my wife, we had talked about getting the car valeted this summer. My attempt at steam cleaning wasn't spectacular, and there are places that can get the interior looking pretty spick and span, and that would be nice. And one of the questions that we'd had was, is it worth it? I mean, if the battery is really tired and they won't replace it under warranty, it's not really worth spending the time and effort fixing a hole in the bumper or making the interior look all pretty. So when 90,000 miles rolled around a few weeks back, we thought, now's the time. The car comes with a 100,000 mile warranty, 10 years, but 100,000 miles. And as we pass 8 years and 90,000 miles, we thought, let's get that check in. So I picked up my OBD dongle and I plugged it in. And I'll tell you what happened in a bit. But before we do, let's talk about some of the highs and some of the lows. The highs, it's basically worked. It came with a fairly new 12-volt auxiliary battery. We haven't had any problems with that. It came with a set of brand new Yokohama tyres. They aren't low rolling resistance tyres, and we definitely see a little bit of range loss from that. But they're fine. They work in the summer and they're okay in the winter, and my wife works somewhere that closes if there is a lot of snow or ice. So why bother changing them? They're okay. We decided not to pay for the Kia Uvo service on this vehicle. You can. It would allow us to pre-cool or preheat the vehicle off the timing schedule, and we thought about it, but really, my wife's job is much more predictable than mine. She goes the same time most days, and so leaving it on schedule works fine. She is not that bothered about the option to pre-cool the car before getting in it. So again, why bother spend money if you don't have to? And then there's rapid charging. This vehicle does come with a CHAdeMO rapid charging port. It is on the front there behind that little flap, and we've used it one time. Used it that one time to test that it was working, having bought the car, because the place that we were when we were buying the car, there wasn't really anywhere to charge it, and also it was pretty much full when we took it for a test drive. So yeah, we tested it once, but because the Soul EV does not have an enormous range, at least the 2015, this is really a vehicle that's suited to the urban environment, and the 90 odd miles of range that you could get on a perfect summer's day without the heating on, if it was full, we realistically see about 60 miles with the vehicle 80 to 90% charged. Yeah, we don't need to charge away from home. I occasionally plug it in at the market or somewhere else just because I can, but rarely do I actually need that extra range. If I took it down to Portland, which technically would be possible, then I would need the range, but I'm not going to do that. We have the Nero EV. It's a really good second car. That's not to say there haven't been any problems. First, the vehicle came with a key. One key. We wanted two. Getting hold of a second key was pretty easy. Getting it keyed to match the car was tricky because One Key Place told us that they needed a PIN code, and I spent a lot of time chasing between them and Kia trying to find out what this mysterious PIN code was. Eventually I ended up asking some other company whether they could match it, and they said no, there's no PIN code on that model year. You just do it. So we did, and that was the end of that. It did take quite a while to resolve that problem because emails, phone calls, chasing people, and because I was the one who'd bought the key originally, no one was interested in helping me. But at the same time, the key was about a quarter of the cost bought from an online parts supplier that it was to buy a new key from Kia themselves. Keying it to the vehicle was also half the price when I got a local locksmith to do it that Kia themselves charge. So all in all, we spent about $200 to get that extra key. The other thing is a really minor but weirdly irritating thing, and that is that there's clearly something wrong with the GPS unit in the vehicle. It thinks that we're about 50 foot to the right of where we are, which means when you're driving down the road, sometimes it will show you driving through buildings or in the water. Most of the time that's not a huge problem, except that when you're driving in certain places, it then starts complaining at you repeatedly that you're driving down the wrong side of the road, and there is, as far as I can see, no way to turn that warning off. I would really love to, because it is quite annoying once it starts. Ironically, today when I was filming the B-roll, it's probably the best it's been with the car mainly actually tracking down the road. which is perhaps the only answer that we found, is to put a camera in it and try and film it. But I could take it to Kia. It might be that some part of the GPS unit needs to be replaced. It might be something more significant within the head unit that's a problem. But am I gonna? Probably not. It's not worth it. Neither my wife nor I actually use the GPS in the car. It's only when we happen to drive down certain local roads where it tends to think that you are on the wrong side of the road. That's kind of irritating, but it's not a deal breaker. You can live with it. Other than that, the suspension has some creaks and groans, and to be honest, the brake pedal in the car does squeak as you press it. I probably should spray some grease on that, but I've been meaning to do that since 2021. What about that interior? Well, at 90,000 miles, the seats are pretty firm. There is some wear on the steering wheel, but otherwise, everything still functions exactly as it should. Unlike our Kia Niro EV, which has been, shall we say, a magnet for the local rodent population, it has been somewhere that mice have decided to call home as they stay over on their travels. It's quite annoying. The Soul EV hasn't had that problem. I'm guessing that the insulation used in the wiring isn't maybe quite so tasty, and so despite the fact that they are parked next to each other, the Soul has survived that onslaught, whereas the Niro has needed a permanent mouse trap to live in the car. We've had one mouse in there from Nikki's house, well, not from the house, but from the land around it, and one from around my house, which is very upsetting. But anyway, back to the Soul. The Soul has been fine. No mice issues. So maintenance-wise, we've spent, I don't know, the cost of a few wiper blades, screen wash, and quite a lot of carpet and upholstery shampoo. There was quite a lot of that I used. But that's it. However, all of that would be fine and dandy unless the battery was completely screwed. So today, I finally splashed the cash. I spent the $16 that it costs to buy Soul EV Spy, which is an application that allows you to look at what the battery in a Soul EV is doing. We actually originally tried to do this when I bought the vehicle, but the OBD2 dongle that I'd taken along didn't work, so I just got a refund because there was no point keeping it. But I do have one now. To be fair, I stole it out of the Niro, which is why it has Velcro on it, because it's held under the dashboard normally. And plugging it in, I looked at the battery capacity of the vehicle and the condition of it. Now, the 2015 Soul EV is a little notorious. Underneath, the Soul EV is equipped with a 27 kilowatt-hour lithium polymer pack from SK Innovation. That pack has a 200 watt-hours per kilo energy density, which is certainly not terribly exciting when compared with modern EVs. Some people have had really bad luck with the batteries, and some people have had really good luck with the batteries, and I hoped I would be on the good luck side, but I haven't had a good history with EVs. My Enfield EV, that died in a flood. My G-Wiz that was bought for my mother, that died after its first drive to her house. Literally on the way there died. So I'm not sure I held out that much hope when I plugged this in. So let's have a look at the results. Okay, so looking at the battery cell map, you can see what each of the cells in the battery pack is doing and what voltage it's sitting at. In this case, all of the cells are sitting at either 3.96 or 3.98 volts. There aren't really any cells sitting significantly far away from that, which suggests that the battery is actually in pretty good shape. That's backed up by the car's overall report, which tells you that the battery's state of health at 90,000 miles is 94.8%, which is incredibly good given the size of the battery. You would expect it to have had more deterioration because of the number of charge cycles it's likely have had to go through, which tend to be higher for smaller capacity batteries. All of this leaves us in a slightly weird place. I'd originally said that if we got a new battery because it was knackered and we got one under warranty, we would do the work to replace that damaged bumper, and we'd probably get the paint primped and primed and, you know, get the interior cleaned up. But now I've got a vehicle where the battery is essentially as new at 90,000 miles. It's lost 5.2% of its state of health. It's basically as good as a new car. I probably should fix that bumper, and I definitely feel like it deserves being treated to a proper detail. So I guess that's what we'll have to do. So in the end, as a used EV purchase, would I recommend a Soul? Yeah, I totally would. It's a compliance car for sure, but it's a really good one. And if you don't have to do long distance drives, and shout out here to one of our great friends of the channel who drove from basically Vancouver, BC down to Texas in a Soul EV, although I think his is a slightly larger battery version. Yeah, you can do it. But for me, it's a great round town car. So that's it. Great car. 20,000 miles. Absolutely no bother. Well, apart from that GPS. And on that note, we're done with today's video. If you have comments, drop us a polite note in the Discord chat room or on Mastodon, or if you're a Patreon supporter, in the comments there. And we've reopened the comments section below, so you can also just pop them down there. But do be aware that those are community moderated by people who report you if you're unpleasant. If you want more, subscribe, hit the bell, and follow the links below to regularly support us with a YouTube membership or Patreon subscription. You'll also find links to our Ko-fi, Bitcoin, and Swag store, as well as that aforementioned Mastodon server. If you haven't got a Mastodon account yet, I absolutely recommend checking it out. It's the nicest social media that I use. Scrolling by on my right is the amazing list of charged up supporters, and shout outs go to our V2G Patreon supporters: Pedro Muro Pinheiro, Alan Tupper, Andrew Martin, Bennett Elder, Brophy Wolf, Chris Maxwell, Cyprian Laplace, Dan Blair, Gordon C., Hay Esker, John Trammell, Kyle Fox, Mark Eggleton, Peter Dillinger, Regine Fellows, Sean Tucker, Stefan Fremgen, Stephen Williams, Tesla in the Gong, Paul Bricknell, Tony Moss, Kyle Hodgson, Chris Ascenter, Denny Hyde, Lance Schall, Linda Irish, Mike Wader, and Paul Nelson. No thanks to this small fly, which is trying to get in my ear. And finally, a big thanks to our off-grid supporters: Paul Conway, Kevin Burrowbridge, Stephen O'Donoghue, Jim Burness, Robert Flannery, Aaron Hann, Ellery Hensley, Rory Litwin, JP Fagerback, Dave Kitchen, Andrew Glenn, Anonymous Freak, Chris and Michael Johnson, Clay Witt, CPU Freak 101, Eric Knack, Joe Bresney, Joe Hughes, John Henderson, Laura Reynolds, Marcel Ward, Matthew Drobnak, Michael I've Made Up, Nigel S., Reggie Watts, Will Graylan, and of course, Ian. I don't know who Michael is, but Michael, if you're out there, you should totally join. Don't forget we make videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday on the main channel, plus Sunday on Take 2. And with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I will see you soon, or Nikki will also see you soon, and as always, keep evolving.